The San Antonio Spurs finally moved on from veterans last season, with DeMar DeRozan heading to Chicago, Patty Mills heading to Brooklyn, and Rudy Gay heading to Utah. They finally decided to turn more towards their youth, and even still managed to make the play-in tournament behind first-time All-Star Dejounte Murray. However, even though they did make the play-in tournament, they were significantly worse than every other postseason team. So with that in mind, what is next for the San Antonio Spurs? When it comes to the Spurs roster, we have to start by talking about first-time All-Star Dejounte Murray, who took a big step forward in lieu of the departure of veterans who got more of an opportunity to have the ball in his hands and be the lead ball handler and playmaker for this team. He showed that he is an elite two-way player with a very smooth mid-range jump shot. He can play make, he can rebound, he can defend, and although he might not be the number one option on an elite playoff team, Dejounte Murray has certainly asserted himself as a star in the NBA. Keldon Johnson was also a benefactor of the opening in minutes and shot attempts, proving he is a very good three-point shooter in the NBA and has a bright future in the league. Ideally, he will be a 3 moving forward as opposed to a 4, but ultimately is going to be a very good starter who provides very good floor spacing. Devin Vassell had a much better second season in the league and was a great performer in their play-in game. He has a very good shot, specifically from deep, will be a very good three-point shooter and spacer moving forward, and ultimately provides value as one of the main pieces of this Spurs team forward. Joshua Primo certainly didn't have a convincing rookie season, but got more minutes and was more productive with those minutes as the season moved on, and at still 19 years of age, has plenty of time to physically mature and to continue to improve to being a valuable NBA player. Jakob Poeltl had his best season in the NBA up to this point, improving his post touch and post scoring, continuing to be a good rebounder and valuable paint presence. Doug McDermott had a fine season in San Antonio before his ankle injury. He is slightly overpaid, certainly, and will likely not be a starter moving forward for the Spurs, but is a solid impact veteran that can give some scoring, spacing, and just a veteran presence in general on what is, for the most part, a very young roster. Lonnie Walker had a fine season, but did not take advantage of more minutes being up for grabs in the rotation this season. He severely struggled from three-point range, something he'd been quite good at for the majority of his career, and ultimately did not perform in a manner that would result in him getting a significant payday this summer in restricted free agency. Trey Jones showed in his second year in the NBA he could be a backup point guard in the NBA. He will never be some elite backup guard who can provide amazing scoring or amazing spacing, but he is a fine playmaker. He can attack the rim and can play very good defense while hardly ever turning over the ball. TJ McConnell, that type of backup point guard. Valuable. Not elite, but valuable. Keita Bates-Diop was a valuable rotational piece for the Spurs roster. He plays with great energy and intensity, making him a solid rebounder and defender, and if he can continue to improve his spacing, has a spot moving forward in the NBA. And Jock Landale, at his first season in the NBA, showed some talent. He wasn't great, he wasn't consistent, nor were his minutes, and that was part of the problem. But he has good vision and passing for his size, has good post touch and hands while providing some spacing, and could certainly have some value moving forward for the Spurs. So the Spurs certainly have some solid young talent with some valuable complementary pieces. But what should the Spurs look to do in this 2022 offseason? The Spurs, on the surface, have one of the quietest off seasons with regards to impending free agents, with only Lonnie Walker set to be a restricted free agent. However, the Spurs could silently be one of the biggest players in this off season as a whole. But the decision on whether to extend Lonnie Walker or to move on from him will be a difficult start to their off season. A conflicting one for a polarizing and conflicting player. Lonnie Walker is a very explosive athlete, who before the season could space the floor very well and had some very positive moments where he looked like he'd be a very good athletic slashing guard who can space the floor. However, those are just moments. They're not consistent. He's very inconsistent, and that spacing did not prove to be something that he could do in the 2021-22 season. Could he get back to that form? Sure, but he didn't show it in his contract year, which severely hurts his prospects heading into this offseason. Lonnie Walker could be one of several players who end up not returning to San Antonio next season if the Spurs wanted to spend big in free agency. And although I am someone who has been quite high on Lonnie Walker over time compared to most, it is difficult to predict what lies ahead with the future of Lonnie Walker. At the right price for 2 to 3 years, I would be open to bringing him back. Significant money over 4 to 5 years, I would be significantly less interested and would rather see that money spent elsewhere in free agency and add it to the large amount of cap space. The Spurs have also picked up their team options for Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, while the Celtics picked up the team option for Romeo Langford before being traded. But even with that being said, if Romeo Langford does not have an impact early on in the season, do not be surprised if the Spurs move on from him before the deadline, because otherwise they are going to be losing him for nothing or paying him as a restricted free agent in 2023. If the Spurs look to be out of the play-in tournament next season, it's possible a few other players on expiring contracts are also moved. Josh Richardson is a solid veteran, but he's likely not a key part of the Spurs' future, and with only 1 year left on his deal, could be traded by next year's trade deadline. Zach Collins is another player who could be involved in trade talks, as he has 2 years left on his deal, but next year's deal is only partially guaranteed, and the last year of that contract is non-guaranteed. So he's another player who is essentially an expiring contract who could be involved in a trade. The most significant player who could be moved is Jakob Poeltl, who only has 1 year left on his contract. Ideally, for the competitiveness and success of the Spurs moving forward, I would love for the Spurs to be able to re-sign him and have him as their starting center long term. However, it is very possible Jakob Poeltl would like a change of scenery, whether that be for a significant pay raise or for a different organization. If that is the case, and the Spurs feel as though they are going to be unable to retain him past the 2022-23 season, we could see a Jakob Poeltl trade before the 2023 trade deadline, where they would likely get a decent amount of return involving at least 1 first-round pick. But arguably, the biggest decision the Spurs will have this offseason is a possible extension of Keldon Johnson. With only 1 year left on his rookie contract, Keldon Johnson will be extension eligible this summer, and the Spurs should heavily pursue locking up one of the core members of this team. Keldon Johnson could deny all deals and bet on himself to try and raise his value through the 2022-23 season, something I would not be shocked about. However, the Spurs must prioritize this deal this summer and at the very least try their best to get a reasonable deal agreed to for Keldon Johnson. As Keldon Johnson showed last year, he is going to be a very good player moving forward in the NBA and will be one of the key pieces on this roster alongside Dejounte Murray. But when you start to look outside the Spurs' current roster, they have many other important decisions regarding this offseason. The Spurs have one of the largest amounts of cap space across the league heading into the 2022 offseason and will have the money to make a splash if they so desire. The Spurs aren't exactly in a market that is likely to persuade Zach LaVine or Bradley Beal amongst other star-type players to join them, but they could have the cap space to inquire. More realistically, they will look to add a starting level power forward, ideally someone like Bobby Portis. Seems like a great fit to me on this team, who could be a power forward / center for them moving forward, as he will likely opt out and look for a pay raise after signing a very team-friendly deal last year with Milwaukee. Or to a lesser extent, they could look to bring in someone like Chris Boucher, who will also be an unrestricted free agent. This would allow Keldon Johnson to move back to the 3, and ultimately allow the Spurs to have their first true power forward that they just haven't had in a few years now. The Spurs will also be able to add more young talent to this group, as they sit with 3 first-round picks in the 2022 draft, those being picks 9, 20, and 25. Ultimately, on the surface, the Spurs don't have massive decisions to make this summer. But with the restricted free agency of Lonnie Walker, a Keldon Johnson being extension eligible, 3 first-round draft picks, and significant cap space, the Spurs could silently be big players and big benefactors of the 2022 offseason. However, knowing the Spurs, I would expect small, smart moves and nothing drastic or overly surprising. But it will be beneficial, specifically when you're talking about having 3 first-round draft picks. Ultimately, the future of the Spurs does not have a sky-high ceiling, and it is relatively uncertain how this team becomes more than a bottom-tier playoff team anytime soon. Not to mention, the year-to-year uncertainty of Greg Popovich and when he will or will not retire does not help any long-term planning of the Spurs organization, as they continue to try and build as competitive a roster as they can instead of doing a proper rebuild to significantly improve their upside and ceiling. This is irregardless of the fact that when Greg Popovich does leave, the Spurs will have a large vacuum of power that needs to be filled, alongside the fact that Popovich has been the key decision maker for the Spurs for over 2 decades now. And so the Spurs are going to have a significant change in coaching philosophy and front office decision making and just leadership within an organization that will have to be filled when Popovich leaves. Something that will probably take some time to figure out and will take some time to have the adjustments be made in a positive manner within the Spurs organization. Ultimately, I think this team will continue to see some internal improvements from Dejounte Murray, from Keldon Johnson, Devin, Vassell, and the likes of others who are already on the roster and who will be joining the roster via the 2022 draft and beyond. But I struggle to see the upside where this team will do more than compete for the play-in tournament, and they lack any clear upside to be more than that over the next 3 to 5 years. That is my thoughts on the San Antonio Spurs and what is next for them heading into this offseason. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And I thank you guys for your continued support. Peace.